So I'm going to show you just a basic epoxy video, a how-to more or less. So let's jump in. I use a two-part epoxy. I use a part A and a part B, and you mix them 1-to-1 ratio. And this is the brand that I'm using. Part A and part B. These are non-toxic when they're completely cured, but they are toxic while in liquid form. These are my measuring cups. This is my mixing cup, my mixing stick. This is the mold that we're going to use, which is just a jar. It's going to be a jar and a lid. And then I am using royal blue. So let's jump in. You should probably wear gloves during this process. I do not. And I will give you a tip. Baby wipes are going to be your best friend while working with epoxy. As soon as you get it on your hands or on your mats, you can always just wipe it right off with baby wipes. And it usually comes right off. And you're going to want to use some form of covering. I like the silicone mats because basically anything is silicone. It's just going to wipe right off with no hassle, no mess. One of these. This is the part A is your resin. The part B is your hardener. That's our resin. This is your hardener. You can see it right there. Hardener. I will leave a link to this epoxy down in the description box in case you decide that you want to do something like this. And again, this is 1-to-1 ratio. So whatever you do in resin, you're going to want to do in hardener. If you mix it unevenly, you are going to end up with a mess. It says to mix it for 3 to 5 minutes, but when you start mixing, it will be cloudy. And when you know you're done, this will turn clear. And that's when you know that it is perfectly mixed and you're ready to do your coloring, or if you're going clear, just dump it straight in. You will see what I mean in just a minute. Now, epoxy has a habit of gathering bubbles. You can see the little bubbles in there. You can mix slow, and that will help get rid of your bubbles. Or make less bubbles, anyway. And then you can use some form of heat, like a lighter or a torch or a heat gun. And that will help pop the bubbles, which I will show you in a minute. It's starting to clear up now a little. Okay. You can see it clear. The bubbles make it look a little foggy, but it's clear. Okay. Now, with the royal blue, it is very dark and you don't need very much of this. I will also leave a link to this ink set. I think that was probably way too much for this amount. You will see why. This ink is more of a translucent ink, so you're going to be able to see through it. If you don't want to see through it as easily, you can just do more. But you don't ever want to do any coloring more than 6% of your epoxy. You always want to scrape the bottom and the sides to ensure you've got all of the resin and hardener mixed properly. Okay. Now for our little jar. I might have to mix more. I don't think I'm going to have enough. Let that sit. And just dump this in here. This stuff is really thick and it's really, really sticky. And you're going to be really hard to get off of your hands. So let's mix up a little bit more and set those back. You can see the bubbles coming to the surface. Epoxy gets hot, and when you're in a mold like this, it probably won't get as hot. But in bigger molds, like my ashtray mold, it basically what I call cooks. And when it cooks, it hardens within like 4 hours. You can take it out. This epoxy is 24-hour curing epoxy, 12-hour unmolding, which means it's just hard enough for you to unmold it within 12 hours, but it's not fully cured until 24 hours. So let's do one more, just enough to fill our lid. And then what's left we'll use in my scraps mold. It doesn't matter what you mix or what you measure with, as long as you do one of each in your measuring. But whatever you measure with, if you're not using silicone, you're going to have to throw away. They make silicone measuring cups, and those are great because you just let the epoxy sit and cure, and you can just scrape it out or peel it out, and you can reuse it. And they make silicone spatulas that are about this size, and it's the same way, but with the spatulas you can just take a baby wipe and wipe the spatula off, and you can use it right after. I own both, but I wanted to make this quick and easy. So, okay, we're just doing a quick mix, so we're going to have a lot of bubbles. Clear? I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. There we go. It's clear. To this round. I feel like that came out even darker than the first batch. Okay, we're just going to top that off. Okay, I have a baby wipe. See the sticky? I'm back. I had to go get my leftovers mold, which I'm doing an ashtray currently, and my torch, which is my heating source to pop the bubbles as they're rising. You can usually let them sit for a little while and the bubbles will rise to the top, and you can use a heat source, like I said, the torch, to pop those bubbles. And I will show you that in a second, but let me go ahead and pour this in here. With this epoxy, you only have around 30 to 40 minutes work time, and then it will start getting really thick and unworkable, and then you basically just wasting whatever epoxy you have left. So with things like this, I like to just make what I call leftover, and I just dump whatever's left over into a mold, and I start building things from there. And I try to scrape as much as I can. This is the last leftover ashtray I did. Okay, now let's set that to the back and bring these up here. And we are going to pop those bubbles. I have it on a low flame because with molds, if you apply too much heat via torch or flame or heat gun, whatever you're choosing to do, you can actually melt your mold or burn your mold. And when you do that, it will come out onto your project, and it'll just be like a chunk of mold missing and a chunk of mold added to your project, and nobody wants that. So just do a quick run through. And let it sit, and in a few more minutes it will keep rising those bubbles up, and I'll come through a couple more times and run it back over it again. And you can see the bubbles on this one are already starting to rise. And I will clean up and be back in just a few minutes. 10 minutes later, I'm just waiting for the rest of these little tiny bubbles to pop up so we can do another round of popping. But I want to give you a few quick tidbits really quickly. If you wanted to do this lid and you wanted to do like flowers or butterflies or something like that in it, before the background, you would have to do a clear layer, a really thin clear layer, and then lay your butterflies or flower or whatever you're wanting to put in it. And then you would let that sit and harden, and then you would add your coloring to that. Or if you just wanted to do it all clear, you could just do a thin layer of clear and then add your stuff to it, and then do another thick layer of clear to finish it off. And the same goes for this if you wanted to do it this way. I also want to mention that they do have mica powders, which give like a pearly effect to it, and it will be a solid color instead of see-through like this. And they have something called alcohol inks, which we'll get into in another project later on. Those are really cool. I've actually become fascinated with those lately. So let's do another round of popping, and then I will see you guys tomorrow. Okay guys, so we are here the next day, and I'm going to unmold the little jar that we did. Unmolding is usually pretty easy unless you burn the mold. And you let it sit long enough to harden to cure. And as you can see, we trapped some bubbles in there, and it left a chunk missing. And you can see a couple on the bottom. But this is a pretty easy fix. You can just sand this down and do your polishing and compounds, and it will remove those bubbles and flatten that out and make it look shiny and brand new again. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.